Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Why does nature in North America feel so unwelcoming? I'm from the UK and like to get out into nature to perform any rituals or meditate. I love camping and always feel welcomed in forests and green spaces of home and Europe. I've camped in Asia, Australia, and South America too, and been fine, but the very energy of the earth in the USA just feels hostile, like it doesn't want humans there.
Though that doesn't apply to all areas here. Admittedly, there are some places that seem just evil. A word of advice for you: stay clear of the Jersey Pine Barrens, stay clear of the Coronado National Forest, and stay out of the Blue Mountains.
I was in Turkey Run State Park in Indiana. Do you know anything about that state? What makes the places you mentioned so bad?
Indiana is one of the few states I haven't been to, so I can't say anything about it. The places I've mentioned are all either dangerous, filled with oddities, or both. The Coronado National Forest is hostile land in every sense of the word, and there's some real weird shit going down in there. The Jersey Pine Barrens just feel like something is very, very, very wrong there. I've only driven through a few times, but I would never stay there and camp. The Blue Mountains, honestly, they're seemingly the calmest of the three, but I've seen so much weird and scary shit there, it holds a special place in my mind.
I used to live right by the woods and I loved it. Creepy vibes? Sure, but I liked that too. I had spots that I felt like I made known were mine, and when I went there I felt good and welcomed by the trees and animals. I generally think that when you're walking through the woods, it's home to many intelligent and conscious life forms, and it's sort of their neighborhood. So if you're a stranger to the area and they have never seen you, every tree and bird and squirrel and bear and Bigfoot is keeping an eye on you because you're new and they don't know if you're going to destroy and cause mischief or live in harmony with them. Once you get to know a place and you regularly visit certain spots, you're either welcome to the hood or not.
This is so true. The place I encountered a ghost outdoors was near a place where a 19-year-old rock climber had fallen and died. It was at the base of this cliff that a lot of tourists would write on the rock with markers and etch things into the stone. I was a harmless presence, but I could see how angry the ghost was when I walked past that base. I didn't look square on, but out of the corner of my eye I could see the spirit watching me from that spot. It was the scariest thing I'd ever seen. I cried, had no flashlight, and was about 30 minutes away from the car in the mountains.
Despite the extensive logging of the West in the past century, and the periodic mass deforestation of the East from prehistory to now, there are still many very primal locations in this country, especially out in the desert. There's nothing quite like coming out of the junipers into a circle of bristle cones framed by ancient granite peaks. There's a real antediluvian feeling to these places. I understand why the New Age movement fixated on this area. I've never felt uneasy in a truly natural place. I feel a custodianship over my natural surroundings, and so I welcome myself into it. I like to think of nature as violence in slow motion. If you're dumb or unlucky, you may get caught up in something, but ultimately it is both immense and uncaring. You're just a mote floating through a great machine. Avoid the gears, learn the meaning of the noises, and maybe find a casing to briefly rest on. I've been in flash floods, wildfires, and impromptu bear powwows. I've only felt malice in places where humans had left their mark. And I believe that feeling came from the remaining human element, not the displeasure of the land at it. Nature doesn't care whether you respect it or not, but sentient beings do. Bears and cougars, yes, but especially humans. Humans are part of the natural system, and the source, not the cause, of any malice you find there. We don't worry over the death spots of caribou, but if a man falls there, you damn well better take care. Just keep in mind that humans are people, and you're as likely to come across benevolence and ambivalence as malevolence. I don't believe spirits linger, but impressions do. You don't need to die to cast your shadow on a place. Just my thoughts.
Not just in North America, some parts of the wilderness are just unwelcoming. The more untouched a forest is, the weirder shit can get for reasons I don't understand. Sometimes you just hike for hours without anything special happening, then it starts all of a sudden. I felt my mind getting foggy and slow, kinda like I was drunk, yet I was completely sober, which immediately stopped after I walked out of that area. On other occasions I've been swarmed by all sorts of insects out of nowhere, which also stopped as soon as I left that particular place. Once a whole lot of crows, at least 2 dozen, gathered on the trees around me and started cawing at me for no obvious reason. Yet in other places you feel completely welcome. Everything feels calm, peaceful, the air smells nice, not even insects bothering you. Animals who are usually shy get very close to you or even follow you around a bit. Like you just want to sit down in such areas and stay for hours just enjoying everything. Nature is a lot weirder than people realize. Though I've noticed intensively managed forests are barren of all such things. They seem dead, more or less. Wonder what it would feel like to be in the middle of nowhere in a jungle somewhere.
I'm from Ireland and I feel the opposite. I dislike any forest or natural setting that isn't USA. For example, movies and TV. I can only get immersed in westerns or adventures or any movie that has wilderness if it is America. If it's a European forest it just feels wrong cause there are no wild forests left. Ireland and England are just damp mushy grey areas, where every inch too is incorporated and owned, where there have been loads of boring surveyors and other boring crap laying all the land. I used to love/hate going on school trips cause there is no wild or open land for them to take us camping or hiking shit. There is literally no open space in the UK where species inhabit or come from. America is clean, wild, cold, warm, green, brown, with plenty of frontier and open space to immerse in any story, be it a western, a historical horror or supernatural show, or a coming-of-age story. I only enjoy things set in America.
Meet me in spring 2013. Visiting Friendo in Waynesboro, Virginia after being away for a good year or so. Friendo and I are real into paranormal shit, not aliens and stuff like that, but ghosts, spirits, and everything related to them. Now understand that I very much dislike mundane life, so I try to experience as much weird shit as possible. If I die a mysterious death doing this, it'll have been worth it. So it's like midday in the middle of Virginia, there's nothing to do, and my friendo and I are bored, so I of course suggest we go camping. Friend doesn't take ideas seriously because we haven't planned or anything, so instead we start talking about interesting shit in the area. We had seen some interesting shit during our school days in the area, mostly while in the mountains between town and Charlottesville. Thus I decide we'll go camping in the mountains. Friend reasonably suggests we go and scout out an area first. We go to what I think is Skyline Drive. It's been a few years, sue me. We found a trail near a small parking area, so we of course went hiking. This was rather uneventful honestly, and a nice typical hike. The scenery is beautiful. I don't see much wildlife, just a few deer. Oddly enough, every time I see them they're slowly walking away. They're about 40 feet away from me each time I see them, but I don't think anything of it. We hike for about an hour, then decide to head back to the car. After getting back to Friendo's house, whatever camping appropriate shit we can find so we can go back. By my own suggestion, we waited until evening. By the time we were even on the road the sun was setting, and by the time we got back to Skyline Drive the sky was turning twilight. We get back to the parking spot, and to my surprise there's someone else there, some Mexican dude stargazing. Get back on the trail, it's as chill as I imagined it, nice and peaceful. Aside from us there isn't a sound. Now I should mention, I don't blame anyone for calling me a schizo, I'm probably some kind of crazy. But this friend here with me is worse. I say this because at this point he starts speaking to some unseen entity. This entity apparently appears to be a small Native American man, like one of extremely diminutive size, like 2 feet tall maybe. My friend says the little man is here to guard us. Now mind you, this was a bit much, so I more or less just put it in the likely bullshit but maybe not box, and pressed on. The sky has darkened further, it's getting damn difficult to see further than 20 feet. It's at this point when I finally realize we are the only sounds in the woods, like it's perfectly quiet. We still haven't come to a good campground however, so I decided to press on. Friend won't move, however, he demands we turn around. I refuse of course, and we start arguing. We then hear something approach us incredibly quickly. A mountain lion and 2 small deer with full-grown antlers are right next to us, just staring, all 3 of them within 10 feet. We're stupid teenagers, so we turn our backs and run. It took us a good hour to get that far up, but we got back to the car in what felt like 3 minutes. We get in, and upon calming down we realize those animals were pitch black. right next to us, and aside from their shape, we couldn't make out a single detail on them. It's now pitch black outside, not a star in the sky, can't see the moon either. Car starts out and we start pulling out of the parking lot. The lights turn on and the situation gets worse. This is a bit hard to describe, alright, so bear with me. What we see is like a void or a pit of tar laid out across the ground. I see that dude's car in the midst of it, consumed by this pitch black mass. Honestly, it could have been anyone's car. I couldn't make out any real detail, just the shape. We just sort of watched it sink in, don't even know how long this took. My sense of time was gone, man, gone. The car finally vanishes within the void, and we snap out of it. Friendo steps on it, and we speed down the road. I'm honestly surprised we didn't crash and die. And that's the end of it. I've seen some other shit in those mountains since then. Honestly, the only reason I don't chalk this shit up to crazy is because we both experienced it. It sits a bit too vividly in my head for me to forget.
There is something uncanny about the woods. I don't live near any now, but used to and walked every day alone and unarmed, frequently off trail. Looking back now, I am struck by how altered my mind was by being there. I was as though being led, lured, observed, tricked, trapped by something or by the woods in general. I always felt like I was intruding in someone's home and like the plants would go quiet and shy around me. Recently I read they proved that plants do communicate and respond to the presence of other beings. I felt like the plants were all talking about me and sometimes to me. I often felt compelled to search for something like a tunnel or underground lair. I was convinced that the barren woods were only the surface and there were tunnels connecting to a thriving inner world. Sometimes I thought I was about to find an entrance. I would stand in some spots and feel really creeped out, and moving a few feet made me feel okay. Sometimes the woods overwhelmed my senses. I felt like I was being swallowed into them. I have a lot of lost time in the woods. I simply can't remember what happened. I remember walking into them and back out again, but the in-between is not there. The man-made trails reminded me of the hallways of the overlooked hotel. They had some kind of maddening effect. And the deer trails always felt like secret passages to special realms, and they were in a way. The deer seem to have a sense of aesthetics, and prefer to be in beautiful places that feel good and peaceful. There are many idyllic places tucked into the woods. Lots of barren emptiness and then suddenly a paradise.
I lost her in the woods a few years ago. I understand that now. We'd been camping for a couple of days up in the highlands and it was fantastic. Clean air, bright sun, and her even brighter smile made every day perfect. The nights were balmy and we were able to just sleep on the bedrolls in our tent. We came across another group of about 10 to 15 people who were hiking and camping like us. They seemed okay, but I don't really mix well with people I don't know. She, on the other hand, was always the life of the party. I often wondered what she saw in me, but I digress. So we ended up chatting with them and having a few drinks around their campfire that night. There was something that just set me off about this group. I'd catch them looking at us out of the corner of my eye. They never broke eye contact whilst you were talking to them and only blinked when you did. Their reactions were ever so slightly exaggerated. Wide grins, wide eyes, and overly embellished nods. I kept up polite conversation, but I'm not one for leading a conversation. After the basic pleasantries were exchanged, they seemed to lose interest in me. She, however, drew them in, like sharks to blood. When we finally went our own separate ways to sleep, she couldn't stop talking about how great they were and how much of a good time she had. The next day I woke up and found out that apparently she'd talked to some of the group and they were having a party that night and wanted us to join them. Naturally, she agreed. It was your typical affair for a group of people in their mid-20s. Music, alcohol, people smoking jazz cabbage and smelling Colombian cake flour. I got bored pretty quickly as it wasn't really my scene, but she was having the time of her life. I remember how she lit up the night and reminded me that enduring this crap was worth it if she was happy. I was a fool. The night grew long and dragged on and on and on. When I told her that I wanted to get going and head to bed for the night, she assured me that we'd leave after midnight. I watched her regale them with stories only to check my watch and find that minutes had passed, not hours. Cups would be emptied and filled countless times before the bottle ran out and another was fetched. I lost count on how many logs were thrown into the fire only to burn down and be replaced. When we finally made our farewells, they tried to get her to stay for longer, and one of the girls grabbed her arm and tried to lead her back. She brushed the other woman off and said she had a great time and wished she could stay, but she had to leave. We got back to our own tent and were both happy. She had had an amazing time, and I was finally getting some peace. I went out to go to the restroom before bed and noticed that the other group had completely packed up. The tents were still there, but all closed up, and there was almost no trace of the party aside from some dying embers in the campfire. I mentioned it to her when I got back in, and she laughed it off as me worry-warding. At some point in the night, I woke up to the tent unzipping and sat bolt upright. She laughed at me again and apologized for waking me, saying she was only going to use the toilet and come right back. I stayed waiting for her again for what felt like hours, but whenever I checked, it was only minutes and seconds that had passed. Eventually, she came back in, but slower, like she wasn't trying to wake me. When she saw that I was awake, she looked confused and angry and asked me why I was awake. I said I hadn't been able to sleep. She huffed and asked me to move over and make room for her, which was strange because we'd been cuddling before. Whenever I tried to snuggle up with her during the night, she'd elbow me away, and I swear I heard her growl at me once. I couldn't figure out why she was acting like this. Things get a bit hazy after this. I must confess that time since then has been a bit of a blur, but things are starting to become more lucid now. I had to pack up our camp myself because she refused to help after touching one of the tent pegs and screaming about how cold it was. She sat there moping and complaining about how hungry and or thirsty she was. This continued for the rest of our trip. What was once paradise on earth, simply due to her being there, had become an endless torment. Every little thing was something that triggered her to go off on a tirade, ranting and raving about how nothing in the world was good. Everything was a slight against her. Eventually it became too much, and I suggested we return home. When we got there at long last, something strange happened. She refused to come inside unless I invited her in. When she initially asked if she could come in, I'd responded, "This is your home, do what you like," which wasn't good enough, and led to even more shrieking and cursing before I told her to come inside before she worried the neighbors. Things didn't get any better once we were back, though. She still complained constantly and ate near enough everything that we had stocked in the cupboards within the week of our return, even foods that she had despised before. She was especially fond of milk, bread, and honey, often at the same time, blended into some amalgamation. She soon lost her job and refused to get another. It was down to me to provide for the both of us, while she sat at home complaining of hunger and cold constantly. She ate whenever she could, and it seemed to be the only thing that made her happy. She refused to use cutlery when I wasn't around. She would only use it when I was present if she could wear gloves at the same time due to them being too cold for her hands. Despite her constant eating, she never gained weight, and coming to think of it, she never really changed in any way, shape, or form aside from just getting grubbier. Eventually, after I started making excuses to stay away from the house. Overtime was the common one, and not too much of a lie, as we always needed money for the quantity of food and resources she consumed. I was often working odd jobs for extra cash as a result. One of those odd jobs was doing shopping for an elderly neighbor who was more or less housebound. He was lonely, and I wasn't going to object to having somewhere else to be aside from home, so we often whittled away the hours chatting. He'd tell me of the war, of his glory days, and of a childhood long since departed. One story that he told me was about how his mother used to threaten him when he was young and misbehaving. "Are you a changeling?" she'd say. He told me, "Have the fairies taken my sweet boy and replaced him with this wicked child?" she cried. He continued saying that he'd quickly hold an iron nail to his skin in protest. For iron, he told me, was the bane of all Fae. He also informed me that these things abhorred the Lord, for they were powerless in the presence of true faith and jealous of the grace man had been bestowed. This disturbed me and made a certain amount of sense. We had both been raised in the light, but her faith waxed and waned whilst I did my best to stay true with the knowledge that faith must be tested in order to remain true and pure. I guess this is simply another test, losing what was precious and having it replaced with an imitation. But I have to do what is right and not be blinded by what once was and no longer is. I know that she isn't the same person who went into those woods with me. I know what I have to do. I have prayed for the strength to carry it through. Wish me luck. I hope iron and faith will see me through. I just wish it wasn't already too late.
Think about it like this. Imagine you're a mountain lion. You were born in the woods, you grew up in the woods, you know every bit of the woods and what animals live there. Suddenly one day, this weird bipedal creature standing 6 feet tall and wearing clothes appears stinking like a skunk ape and strolling confidently down trails. Already you're confused. Such a novel creature seems alien to your world. And now, when you try to turn this human into your prey, he not only does not run away or act afraid, but smiles some demonic smile at you and approaches you. You would run for the hills and live to meow another day.
You are going to get yourself killed. Go ahead, go fuck around in mountain lion or bear territory. And please make sure there is an open bar at your funeral. I am quite fond of gin.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
There's also a Rumble archive as a backup.